$4 quadrillion. That is the volume the DTCC clears every single year. 15 zeros of capital that moves through one institution, one set of pipes, one quiet machine that almost no retail investor has ever heard of. And on a Tuesday, with almost no fanfare, the man who runs that machine walked to a podium and confessed something the market is not yet pricing in. He didn't say blockchain is coming. He said the rails are already chosen. Now think carefully about what that means. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation does not speculate. It does not chase narratives. It is the silent backbone of the United States equity market. And when its leadership announces, on record, that tokenized securities will share the same legal protections as traditional book entry assets, they are not asking permission. They are signaling completion. A decade of architecture. A decade of NDAs. A decade of, we don't know what they're building. The blueprint just walked into the room, and almost nobody in retail is looking up. What I'm about to walk you through is not being explained on financial television the way it should be. Not because it's hidden, but because it requires a kind of patience the news cycle does not reward. So let's slow down. Let's read the signal underneath the announcement. Make sure to like and subscribe, and drop a comment below with your opinion on XRP. And watch until the end, because the final minutes reveal why July 13th could change everything. Welcome back. I am the calm analyst. Today we decode the most consequential institutional statement of the cycle so far, the DTCC's 2026 tokenization launch, and we examine why two specific networks were positioned years in advance to be the rails this quadrillion-dollar machine will run on. No hype, no price targets, just the architecture, the math, and the names that have already moved. Let's start with a hard truth. 95% of crypto investors right now are staring at the wrong chart. They are watching candles. They are watching sentiment. They are watching influencers argue about a 4-hour pattern. Meanwhile, the actual infrastructure of the next financial system is being welded into place, and the welds are visible if you know where to look. To understand what the DTCC just announced, you must first understand what the DTCC is. The DTCC is the sole post-trade infrastructure provider for United States equities. Every share of Apple, every share of Tesla, every block trade between BlackRock and Vanguard, it all passes through the DTCC and its clearing subsidiary, the NSCC. $4 quadrillion annually. One pipe, one ledger. For 50 years, that ledger has been a closed, centralized book entry system. Trades settled in T+2, then T+1. Counterparty risk lived in the gap between execution and settlement. Collateral sat still. Markets closed on weekends. That model is now being dismantled, not destroyed, but replaced by an institutional-grade tokenization layer that will go live in the second half of 2026. And here is what almost nobody in retail understands. The DTCC is not building this in isolation. The CEO explicitly said, on record, that they expect a multi-ledger world. Translation: multiple public blockchains will carry these tokenized assets. The DTCC will not pick one chain. It will pick the chains that meet institutional requirements: compliance-minded architecture, settlement finality, regulatory neutrality, and a credibly neutral bridge asset for cross-ledger liquidity. That is not a vague preference, that is a specification document. And only a handful of networks in existence meet every line of it. Let's do the math the retail crowd refuses to do. The DTCC clears roughly $4 quadrillion annually. The global cross-border payments market sits at $150 trillion per year. The derivatives market, the actual collateral and settlement layer behind global finance, is valued at $1.2 quadrillion in notional exposure. Now imagine even a single-digit percentage of that volume migrating onto public blockchain rails over the next decade. Not all of it, not most of it, a fraction. If tokenized securities capture just 2% of the DTCC's annual clearing volume, that is $80 trillion flowing across new infrastructure every year. $80 trillion seeking settlement, liquidity, and a neutral bridge. Now look at the supply side. XRP has a fixed cap of 100 billion. Roughly 57 billion circulate. The rest is locked in escrow, released monthly, and historically relocked. The XRP ledger does not inflate. It does not stake. It does not dilute. Every transaction burns a fractional amount, slowly and permanently reducing supply. Here is the math that the panic sellers ignore. If $80 trillion in annualized settlement flow requires even a thin layer of XRP liquidity to bridge, say a 0.1% float held in market maker inventory at any given moment, that is $80 billion of XRP locked into operational liquidity. Against a fixed cap, against a draining float, against a circulating supply that institutions are quietly extracting from exchanges. This is not a prediction. This is a requirement. The math is not optional. If the volume arrives, the liquidity must exist to support it. And if the liquidity must exist, the price must adjust to make the float sufficient. If you have a problem with that conclusion, you do not have a problem with me. You have a problem with arithmetic. While retail investors are complaining about red candles, look at who has actually moved. Ripple acquired Hidden Road, a prime brokerage clearing over $3 trillion annually across asset classes. They acquired G Treasury, corporate treasury infrastructure plugged into thousands of enterprises. They didn't acquire marketing companies. They acquired the connective tissue between corporate balance sheets and tokenized settlement. BlackRock filed. Franklin Templeton tokenized a money market fund on a public ledger. Fidelity built custody. JP Morgan ran Onyx pilots. The DTCC named Chainlink as an interoperability partner in earlier pilots. Stellar was named explicitly in the DTCC's tokenization framework discussions. Japan's FSA has cleared XRP as a non-security. The Digital Asset Clarity Act has cleared committee. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does a custodian like BNY Mellon, managing over $50 trillion in assets under custody, categorize two specific tokens under a special classification by accident? Does Larry Fink call Bitcoin digital gold and then have his firm quietly file infrastructure paperwork for tokenized securities without knowing exactly which rails those securities will travel on? These are not gamblers. These are positioners. They do not move on hope. They move on legal certainty and signed documentation. And every single one of them is moving. That is the signal. The red candles are the smokescreen. Mark these dates. Second half of 2026. DTCC tokenization service goes live. Russell 1000 ETFs and other liquid securities begin moving onto blockchain-based settlement rails with full investor protection parity. June 2026. The NSCC plans to operate on a 24/5 trading schedule, Sunday 8 p.m. through Friday 8 p.m. Eastern. Continuous markets require continuous settlement infrastructure. Legacy systems cannot provide it. Tokenized rails can. Throughout 2026, the SEC, under current leadership, has publicly committed to embracing tokenization. Chairman Atkins has stated on record that on-chain delivery versus payment is the de-risking endpoint of modern market structure. Late 2026 into 2027, interoperability standards, modeled on ISO 20022 messaging, finalize the technical specification for how tokenized assets move across multiple public ledgers. A neutral bridge asset is not optional in that architecture. It is required. Each of these is a switch. Each switch removes a layer of risk premium currently suppressing the price of the assets that will carry the load. When the switches finish flipping, the wait-and-see capital becomes the all-in capital. And the all-in capital does not buy at current levels. It buys at whatever level it has to. We are moving from an era of abundance into an era of scarcity. Exchange reserves of XRP have been declining for months. Tokens are migrating from hot wallets into institutional cold storage, multi-signature vaults that do not return inventory to the market for a 10% trade. Once a token enters that vault, it is functionally gone. It is no longer part of the liquid float. It is part of the operational reserve of an entity that plans to hold it for a settlement function, not a speculative one. The same pattern is unfolding on Stellar. The same pattern will unfold on any network selected as institutional rail. When the DTCC tokenization service goes live in 2026, the risk premium suppressing these assets does not gradually fade. It gaps. That is how regulatory clarity prices in. Not in a smooth curve, in a step function. And the people positioned before the step are the people who own the next decade. The institutions have spent years patiently shaking out weak hands. They have funded the FUD. They have welcomed the panic sellers. Because every coin sold in fear becomes exit liquidity for the informed. The door is not yet closed, but it is no longer wide open. I know watching this market right now is exhausting. The candles are red. The headlines are designed to break your conviction. Every cycle, the same pattern. The loudest voices announce the death of the asset just before the asset finishes accumulating. As an analyst, I am trained to separate noise from signal. The noise is the price action of the last 30 days. The signal is a $4 quadrillion clearinghouse publicly committing to blockchain settlement rails by next year. Being early feels indistinguishable from being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. And then, it doesn't feel early anymore. It feels obvious. The question is not whether the tokenization wave arrives. The question is whether you are still holding a position when it does, or whether you sold it to the institution that is preparing to sit on it for the next 20 years. That is the only question that matters right now. Make sure to like and subscribe, and drop a comment below with your opinion on XRP. And watch until the end, because the final minutes reveal why July 13th could change everything. Price is a distraction. Architecture is the reality. The DTCC did not announce a product, it announced an inevitability. The pipes are being rebuilt, the rails are being chosen. The names of the assets carrying the load are no longer a mystery to anyone who has been reading the filings instead of the chat rooms. If you made it to the end of this analysis, comment, "The rails are chosen," below. I want to see who is actually paying attention and who is still staring at the candles. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Haste leads to loss. Calm analysis leads to victory.